Welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast for small business owners who want to leave social media without losing all their clients.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about doing things your way, even if it's not the way that everybody else is doing it, especially with online business and artistic practice. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and this month I have published my second ever book. It's called Your Attention is Sacred, Except on Social Media, and I would love if you would get a copy. You can head to yourattentionissacred.com to learn all about it. But in a sentence, it is a rallying cry for artists, writers, teachers, healers, small business owners, and critical thinkers of all kinds who are ready to break free from the attention economy and reclaim your creative integrity. If you buy a copy today, you'll get everything that's inside, including my argument against the attention economy, thoughts on how to break up with the algorithm, 5 principles for cultivating your attention like a garden, as well as refreshed and reimagined versions of my 5-step plan for leaving any social platform and my list of 100 ways to share your work and life without social media. So all of that is in the 100 pages of the book. But if you order it this month, you will also get a signed copy. Every copy I ship is signed, as well as some exclusive artist-designed postcards that are shipping with the books. And if you buy a book bundle, you can come to the Off the Grid retreat, which is happening live on Zoom November 5th, 6th, and 7th. There will be daily somatic practices and visualizations, including one from today's guest, Grace Allerdice, as well as brand new workshops and conversations with me, breakout rooms and affinity groups for community connection, and daily giveaways. So the retreat's going to be amazing, and the only way to get a ticket is to buy a book bundle. They're very affordable. They come with a lot of great stuff. And if you don't have one already, I hope that you will get one today. Today on the show, I am joined by Grace Allerdice, who is coming back on the podcast for the 5th time. She is my most frequent guest, but she hasn't been here in a while. So longtime listeners will recognize her, but new listeners may just be getting introduced. Grace is a priestess, a podcaster, and one of my personal friends and guides. And in this episode, she shares how her self-employment journey has also been a spiritual initiation and the many ways that deep alignment has guided her into the present moment. We also explore our solar and lunar marketing styles. We have pretty different ways of sharing our work, and I dig into that a bit. And I think we offer an example of what close biz friendship can really look and sound like through different stages of business and life. So I hope that you enjoy the episode. And if you do, Grace has created a really beautiful free live event happening December 5th and 6th to help you re-understand energetic sovereignty. Grace is an amazing virtual facilitator, and these calls will be full of storytelling, ceremony, and creative exploration. You can register for free at the link in the show notes. So go get the link, go register. And it's perfect because you can hang out with Grace at the Off the Grid retreat on November 5th and then hang out with Grace at her event on December 5th. So I hope you'll head to the show notes and sign up for that as you listen. But for now, let's dive into my conversation with Grace Allerdice. Hi, Grace. Welcome back to Off the Grid.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be back. I'm always happy to do anything with you, as you know.
I feel like longtime listeners will definitely know that there was a while where you were on the show like seasonally. Like we taught a class together for a year and you came on in the spring and the summer and the fall and the winter. And then after that period, you kind of cocooned into your business and your life. And now you're back. I'm thrilled to have you back, and I'm really excited to talk about that journey and talk about business and talk about, the role that business has played in our lives and our spiritual development over the past many years, both together and separately. And I wanted to begin this conversation kind of from the very beginning, as it were, which is with a podcast episode that you made, I think like 5 years ago now. And that episode was called Your Deep Alignment is a Portal. And in that episode, you talked about your decision to leave social media. And that episode was a spark in our friendship. It was a spark that inspired me to leave social media. I cite it often. I'm always linking to it in emails and on websites and calls and things. And I wanted to kind of time travel back there together and invite you to share with listeners a little bit about what led you to create that episode? Why is deep alignment a portal? And how do you relate to that now?
I was feeling, I think, really at the end of the way I was noticing myself under the influence of social media, feeling like I was constantly on either some kind of compulsive scrolling, getting lost in other people's opinions, getting lost in what everyone else thought was important at the time, and then myself feeling like I need to have a reaction to that. I was feeling very reactive instead of very creative, and I'm a deeply creative person. So whenever I'm not feeling creative, that's a pretty big cue to me that something's off. And I think another part of it as it relates to business is that I wasn't liking who it was asking me to become in order to try to build a business. I think all of us are pretty aware, at least probably your listeners, and I know you are. We can feel when we really land. We can feel when I did that, and I can feel that it landed with the people. And I never felt that way on social media. And that's always frustrating to feel like you're trying to. And then also, I was really outsourcing a lot of my GPS and navigation around business, particularly online business, which I was primarily doing almost exclusively at the time and was relatively new to me. But it's what everyone said to do. It's like that's still the primary advice. And I had really given it all I got. Tried all the tricks, tried all the templates, and that level of outsourcing and doing what I was told was best, I'd really hit a peak of the frustration of that dynamic as well. And so I think all of that was a way of starting to call my energy back to myself, which is usually step 0 for me in the grounding floor. If I don't know if I can feel when I start to get spun out or overwhelmed, when I hit the end, I don't need to know what's next, but I know I need to come to ground 0, and that's stop moving, pull your energy in, call it back. And I think that was one of those moments for me.
I really relate to what you're sharing about the journey of pulling back from social media as coming back to yourself and coming back to ground 0. I'm so curious for you then, when that moment of sort of coming back to ground 0, how does that relate to your deep alignment as a portal? Is that the work of the portal? Is it the work you need to move through the portal? How do you think about this beautiful, potent phrase that you've gifted us?
I'll start off by saying the portal is now. The portal is always going to be the now moment. And we can only access now when all of us is here, when we're being all here, when we're all with us. I'm not frustrated and bitter about the past. I'm not thinking about this post from yesterday or my content for tomorrow. It's when I'm here now. And Though it sounds simple and cliche, it is what all of the enlightened masters say because it is true. And all the things they're trying to get you to do is just to get to now because it really is the portal. I was listening to Sarah Thomas, who's a really gifted and knowledgeable teacher and healer, teaches a lot about stonework and crystal medicine in a way that really resonates with me, specifically from the Taoist alchemical tradition. And Sarah was sharing about how in Taoist alchemy, it's when the heart softens that we have access to now. And it's also the heart is the organ or the energetic organ that knows. And so when you enter into now, you will know what to do. You won't know 30 minutes from now because that's not now yet. It's only now that you will know what to do. And I think deep alignment is who, where, and how we need to be to get to now.
I think of portals as a place from here to there. But what I'm hearing you say is that now is the only way from here to there. And I think that this goes, it runs a bit counter to a lot of the business conversation I see, right? That's about 5-year plans and strategic visions that have you living far in the future from where you are, or even some of the conversations around timeline collapsing or quantum leaping that I think fundamentally misunderstand what those things might be, right? It's not about, they present it like you're jumping into the future, but I think even those are meant to be perhaps mechanisms of the present. And so I'm really struck by your deep alignment as a portal, meaning your deep alignment is your access to the present moment. It's your access to right now. And I love what you're sharing about the heart as knowing and as the way to discerning what to do, which is a question that every business owner I know is asking this year. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
And I also want to offer that, alignment is a dance. It's a movement. It's not a fixed thing. What is alignment for me now will be different tomorrow or 5 years from now. What was alignment for me then I'm a very different person than I was 5 years ago. At least I hope so. And as life changes, we change or invites us to change. And so now changes as well, and how we access it changes. But the principles of it are the same. And I think the more we practice it, the stronger that bridge gets. And I think the more we engage with now, the deeper our alignment gets as well, and vice versa. And I think there's a way to ground into that level of coherence and presence and say, based on what I can see now, where am I walking towards in this pretend game of time? And also to know that that's always going to be up for grabs. Yeah, because we don't know what will happen tomorrow, much less 5 years from now. So, and I think a lot of people who are business owners who've had to navigate the past 5, 6, 7 years are really privy to just how agile, to just how different one moment can be from the next, and who you're going to be asked to be and touch into. And I think the people who really know how to have their finger on the pulse of now are always going to have a nugget of gold to share.
My next question is, how do you get your finger on the pulse of now, Grace?
I was like, well, that is what a spiritual practice is.
I'm curious, though, through the lens of your own experience, because, I've alluded to how much your business has changed over the past 5 years. And when you made that episode, you were running online classes and you had a membership community called Kin that was all on Mighty Networks. And then that shifted and you moved into more Notion consulting. And then we taught the Living Systems course together. And then you went through this sort of portal, this deep initiation, this transformation. So I'm curious, could you share a little bit about how your work evolved and what you're up to now and like what deep alignment means to you in this iteration of yourself and your business?
There's a way that I've been transforming very publicly through the podcast and being online, which for someone who likes to be private is interesting dynamic. So in 2019, when I closed a business, that was also a very kind of public failure and fall from grace that also not coincidentally brought up or invited me to engage with all of the things about business and money and relationships that I had literally spent my entire life avoiding up until that point. So there's a way that this chapter of me working in business and being a creative person has simultaneously been integrating all of that, looking at all of that, learning from it, healing it, while also being like, what's the finger on the pulse and how do I bring it through? And I'm so grateful for all of those iterations. I think, if nothing else, when I think about possibly what gift that could have offered to others, is of course, each of those offerings was a gift, but also permission to change and do whatever that takes. And there's been a deep wound for me that really has hummed below the surface for a lot of my life. That's the things that I am good at. My gifts are not important. They're not monetizable. They're not valuable. That's been a big story for me. I was a dancer. Well, I'm still a dancer, but I'm not pursuing a full-time dance career. And then also, a lot of my other gifts are primarily I experienced through teaching yoga or facilitating ceremony or being an oracle, things that just make you sound like you play Dungeons and Dragons too much. And so I had a lot of wounding and narratives and shadow around that I really needed to work out. And so, for instance, going to Notion Consulting and being like, this is something that I'm good at. This is something that people easily understand. It's something that people are willing to pay me to do. And I was making pretty good money at it. It also just wasn't it. It's like, if I die tomorrow, is this my life's work? It's not. It's really not. And for some people, that question might not matter, but for me, it does. And I know myself and I understand my essence enough to know this ain't it. There's a way that me doing this is band-aiding a deeper issue that I absolutely have to reckon with and embody if I am going to live out my life's work on the planet. So basically all that happened was I quit trying to be someone else and I stopped running from the thing that I didn't want to look at. And I really do believe that there is a gradient towards wholeness in life, in our lives as micros and in the capital L life as the macro. And I see it in the micro in bodies. I've been teaching movement in so many different ways for at least 20 years now, all of them alignment based. And you can see how when the shoulder's out over here, or for instance, in my own body, how I had injuries on my left ankle, which caused me to lean a little bit over here, which means my right hip kind of hurts, which means my right shoulder's kind of funky, which means my head, and it's not because you can see how there is a snowball effect towards misalignment, but it also goes the other way around. Once one thing starts getting restored towards center or towards where it wants to be and how it functions, it has a domino effect there as well. And even if I was to go all the way into the misalignment, which sometimes we need to do.
This is how I found myself at like a coding boot camp in 2018.
Absolutely. Bless those moments where we're there and we're like, why the fuck am I here? And for other people, it manifests in with like addiction and things like that, where it's really taken them all the way to the end of where that rope can go. Even if it goes there, there's still an invitation towards wholeness, always, I think. And I think that's what happened to me and to my business.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, you have always inspired me and you continue to inspire me in many senses. I think that one is your commitment to wholeness and your willingness to be uncomfortable, to be unsure, to not know in service of the deepest knowing and in service of following alignment and seeking out what wholeness really is for you. And I do think that the business path in general is full of these, like, people call them shiny objects, but also just like real money.
Yeah, easy ways to make $1. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like cash and success and fame and all of these things. And I don't know anyone who's walked that path and hasn't been drawn toward some of those opportunities or been taken away from their inner knowing by the promise of something else, myself included.
And there's no judgment or shame on that. Like it makes sense. That's understandable, I like to say. And, something I learned so hard when I had to close my business is that sometimes the things that you have to do to survive aren't clearly right and wrong. And you're just doing your best and you're making a hard decision. And sometimes you have to do that in your business. Sometimes not everyone has the luxury of doing what I did when I did.
I want to wrap in 2 other words here that I hear you use a lot that I appreciate how you explore them, and that's initiation and mystery. Something that has always been a difference between us that I'm sure listeners can pick up on around mystery is that I'm the first to be like, hello, here's my entire life. I will lay everything out on the table for you. Let me like literally crack open my chest and show you my insights. And I am not a private person by default. I have learned some of that over time. And as you've already self-identified, right? Like you enjoy that privacy and while you do speak to your experience and share it often, I find that for you, that sharing isn't from the place of like, let me bring everything into the sparkling light of day. It's more, it feels to me like, let me invite you into the darkness of mystery. And I think as friends and colleagues, what that has invited me to do is remember that there's truth in both places. And also that like the sparkly, shiny light of day people telling me their truth, like I can question that. It's not always quite truth. And then other people shrouding the truth, I can ask like, what is the purpose of this shroud? Is it for the sake of mystery or is it for the sake of deception or to trick me? And I suppose I say all of that because I appreciate that difference between us so much. It's taught me a lot about what it means to know yourself, what it means to know other people, what it means to share your work in the world. And it's helped me just see both paths as beautiful. But I'm curious, maybe the most practical question I have here is like, how do you think about sharing your work and speaking to what you do now in a way that does honor the truth of it while also maintaining your privacy and keeping the sacred things sacred, which is part of how I see your work?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of sacred work is that the inner temple is not made to be on the outside. There's a reason it's on the inside. And I think each of us, regardless of how, sparkly and on display we are, there is still something that is just for us. And as you pointed out really skillfully, is any behavior can be rooted in shadow or rooted in authenticity and coherence. So it's less about the behavior and it's more about what's true in that moment. It's hard to think about this not astrologically. I think a key difference between the two of us is that you have a strong solar chart. And my solar presence is very weak, but I have a very strong moon. And just light is different at night. It changes. It's bright sometimes. It's not sometimes. The moon's over there and now it's over here. And it happens with the sun as well. Our relationship to light and warmth changes obviously throughout the year, but it's a longer and more subtle rhythm. And there's a way that I'm really comfortable with movement. And there's a way now that I'm also accepting and becoming comfortable that I shine best when the lights go out. And there's some really literal ways that that's true, holding ceremony or something, for instance. I want to be in the candle space. I want to be in the space where the lights are dim and we're being lit by candles. And I've got my eyes closed and it's time to bring her in. That's where I feel like I shine. But again, it's not in the market. It's not at Publix and it's not at noon. So there's an element of mystery and invitation to it. It's a very yin energy, which my acupuncturist is constantly reminding me that I have a lot of. He'll say something like, I love an extreme. So there's that. Also, and night lends itself to mystery and to the mysterious. And I think some of that too is in service of teaching and sharing as service. I feel much more closely oriented to what my service is now. And so if there's something asked of me to share or illustrate it, and I can see how it's plugged into how it's really going to help someone, and it's really going to move the needle for someone, or it's going to really invite someone into their heart. And then of course, no questions asked, it's getting shared, which is a little different for me than sharing by default, or a phrase that I think of, and it's from the Bible. I think Jesus says it, but don't quote me on that. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't take the things that are most precious and just throw them in the mud where they're just going to get trampled. That phrase hits me a lot. And I think especially in social media, there's a way that I see people really authentically and beautifully and vulnerably, creatively, offering their voice and their work the way that we want to do. And I do it as well. I never feel like I'm hiding. Funnily enough, in contrast, I feel like I'm generally trying really hard to paint all of the walls the color of me. And I'm like, do you see it? And people are like, no, but we feel it. So we'll just show up at night and wait for the lights to go down. And that's funny to me now.
Yeah.
Not treating the things that are most precious as if they're commodity. And I think there's parts of us that's true of, but also not being holy or self-righteous about that either at all. That's just a really authentic way for me to be. And it's taken a lot, almost 40 years for me to kind of make peace with it.
I'm wondering, this feels so reductive after everything you just said, but I'm wondering if you'll share a little bit about how that has really changed your marketing over the past few years. Because I feel like you've had these steady containers of the podcast and your newsletter that you've always shown up in, that you've always shared yourself there. But also I feel like the ways that you share now, or the strategies you use to sell your membership or invite people to classes, they feel tangibly different to me than they did a few years ago. So could you speak a little bit to that? I think especially, I'll just say, for listeners who are lunar beings like yourself, I sometimes hear them listening to my very solar, human design generator advice of go out into the world, put everything in the light of day. That's very much my energy and that's what works for me. But I'd love if you could share a little bit about what you found really works for you when you are sharing and selling your work.
Yeah, the podcast and the newsletter are still the places I love the most to show up. And I think the things that I've been remembering the past few years is just how much every opportunity that's been meaningful in my life has always come through relationships. It's come through a coffee date on Zoom or in person. It's come through collaborations, which always leads to the next one, which leads to the next one. And that's just a way that I've learned. I really looked back over my life and noticed that's how it's always worked. And another thing that's been really threading in the past year is I'm much more magnetic in person. I never have trouble selling anything in person, even before I knew how to sell anything when I was just like a meager, early 20s brand new Pilates teacher. Being like, "Do you want to buy 10 lessons for $1,000?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course they're going to say yes because they love me." And they did because they do. And so there's a way that I notice my presence have a different effect in person and online, which I think can be easy to forget about when we're used to being mostly online. We can kind of forget that the world outside is available to us when it comes to marketing our business and letting ourselves be known. I think another thing that's viscerally changed and that feels really different is that, speaking of initiation, there were just ways that I really was invited to meet head on the part of me that doesn't want to be misunderstood. To now be like, actually, like I had to really metabolize that and not let that run the show anymore. And that has really led to a much stronger and clearer voice, both in my teaching and how I hold space for other people, whether that's in groups or not online in person, doesn't really matter. But there's something that's really clarified about my presence and my voice because that's now really out of the way. It's not white noise blocking the messaging anymore. Like, "Oh, let me explain this and offer 55 disclaimers about how I think you could potentially misinterpret the thing that I said." And just being really true to what the message is and what wants to be written, what wants to be shared from now, and making that the most important thing. So I would say those have been the really primary pivots. And I'd had this funny dichotomy that built up in my mind where it was like my online presence is more real than my in-person presence. And they were operating as these separate things. Like I didn't talk about one in the other space and vice versa. And I don't exactly know what shifted, except I realized that that was ridiculous. And it feels much more like a unified whole. And I also just feel better. Like I'm not juggling 6 different things. This is all one thing. And that's been really helpful and fortifying for me as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate many of the things you emphasize there, especially like relationships, recognizing that as a key to how your work had always moved through the world. And also realizing that sort of funny thing that I think happened for a lot of people through the pandemic, where the internet became more real than the real world or the material physical world around us. And I have watched many business owners sort of struggle to find their footing in what is their business now in a world where people are going back to being in person together. And I really appreciate hearing how you really like reclaimed that for yourself, remembered that for yourself. And also, that didn't mean that you stopped doing things online or that, right? It just has all integrated. You're teaching yoga again and leading, your membership and your classes. And so I think that that's really important to remember, especially for folks who hang out in a lot of online business circles where I think there's often a sort of implicit suggestion that our businesses should all be on the internet and should be like passive entities, like where the goal is always that we don't need to do anything eventually. And that's not how I think of creative business, because I don't think of creativity as something you can like eject yourself out of. I've never said it that way before, but I think that like I'm not creative for the sake of exiting the creative process. Like I want to be in the process. And then I also just wanted to add in that, speaking to the ways that you've shifted how you share and sell, some of my favorite things I've seen you do in that are you write a great poem to sell a class now, which I love. No one's ever sold to me via original poem before. So, so I love that.
Great.
Also, you've done some audio only sales pages where people really had to listen to activate that resonance and come into some of your containers. And I've loved that.
I'm always trying to get out of a sales page, honestly.
Relatable, very relatable. And then I also think something I've seen through that is that I think it's that finger on the pulse piece, but also your like trust and your inner knowing, which is that so often I'll be on a call with somebody and we'll come up with an idea like that. But between the idea emerging and the thing being sold, the like faith in that idea really disintegrates. And it's like, oh, but if I try that, what if no one listens? What if nothing sells? What if it doesn't work? Right? That's always the big thing. Like so much of strategy work is about trying to ensure that it will work. Like if we can just control the sales process, then I'll get the result I want from it. And I'm curious how you think of that. Like, how do you, I guess, like hold on to the faith? Like, this is just what you need to do and you're going to do it? Or does the fear come up for you? Do you process it? Is it gone? I'm just so curious.
I think the first thing that comes up when you say that is there's always wisdom in what's arising. There's always something I can understand from what happened or what is happening. And I think that's my number one guiding principle. Whether I like it or not isn't really the most important thing anymore. It's did I do what I set out to do with my whole heart? And what can I learn from that process and what happened? Keep going. There was something else that you said, though, that's really, like, as you're saying that, I think, too, it can be really important to understand how you work creatively and how you come closest to what you feel like is kind of the flame of your work. For me, the amount of alone time I need to feel functional is just absurd, honestly, for most people. But I am a deeply like artist hermit vibe. I when I'm alone and I have everyone else's noise out of my space, that's when I can come close to what wants to get made, the offer, the email, whatever. And when I start bringing other people into it too early, it starts to get cloudy and murky, and then I feel lost and confused, and I know that I've lost it. And even when I was making dances, I wouldn't bring other people in to watch until it was basically done. And I was already, and then just because someone gave me feedback doesn't mean that I took it. They'd be like, oh, that part doesn't make sense to me. I don't like that. I'm like, that's my favorite part. It is definitely staying. But that can only come when we ourselves, the creators, are really in close communication and relationship to the thing that wants to get made. And the way everyone does that is different. And that is the most important part of the process. To me, I'm usually only distraught if I lose that connection. If I feel that that went away, that's when I'm like, everything's got to change. Because I think the trust or the faith part of it, to use the word that you used, is not that like everything's going to turn out the way that I want. It's that whatever happens, I'm connected to life. That's the trust. And that doesn't mean I don't shoot for what I want, that I don't work towards what I want. It doesn't mean that I don't learn from what I did and how it could be better or more finesse next time. Of course, we're doing all of those things. But my trust isn't on the outcome. It's in the process of life itself. And having a deep knowing that I am plugged into that, period.
I think that's really profound and something that I really want listeners to hear, because the way I see it, 2025 has been a very tumultuous year. And I think that a lot of people are like gripping for control and for the answer. And as we lead into 2026, I think it's just going to be another year of experimentation and of not knowing. And, you know, I spoke with an astrosomatic practitioner in the clubhouse recently and for interwebers, and I talked about how this just feels like a year where we're being asked to see in the dark, and vision is different there. And I don't think that we have to hate that. Like, I think we can
No.
actually embrace that.
For sure. And, all the dark house luminary people out there are like, oh, we're marching to Mordor now? I've got this. All the little eighth house sons like me are like, oh, I was made for this. Got it. So it's your time to shine, baby. So
Yes, right on time.
yeah.
But I think that really speaks to what you're saying, which is that if we define success in the outcome, we are always constricting or constraining or limiting life.
We're resisting what is, which keeps us out of now, which means we can't know and we can't be in alignment. Like right now, I also work in my husband's business, and I spent years resisting that and just being so annoyed with it because I had a fun story about how it was just symptomatic of how I had not yet succeeded to the degree that I would like to financially through my business. For some reason, those were feeling so mutually exclusive, and now they don't. And unsurprisingly, because this is how life works, when we stop resisting what is, we're able to see the wisdom of what is here, and somehow life opens to us. We have access to now, and we know. And we can get more access to ourselves, which is really what we're all trying to do.
I think what I'm really taking from this conversation so far is that sense of now, is that sense of surrender, and is that sense of, as I'm hearing you describe it, like having your finger on the pulse is really also like being plugged into life for yourself. And when I think about the folks I work with who I mentioned earlier, where it's like there may be an idea that arises, but then there's that sort of disintegration of trust or faith or belief in the idea. And so instead of actually doing that weird, wild thing that came up, they or we do the sales page that everyone promises will make us succeed. And I mean, let me tell you, I have sales page teachers on this podcast. Like I love a good sales page. I love a good template, but I love it when it feels like what is called for. And I also love when people do things that I can tell are just so true for them and resonant with the offering that they're creating.
We can feel the power of that. We often don't understand why. It's not usually a cognitive thing, but we get an email in our inbox or we land on a sales page where we can tell we can feel the spark of creation coming through someone so clearly. We can feel that, and that will sell things to the right people for that offer or for that offering. I love that you're bringing that up because it's really important, and I think it's something that can get really lost. I think I love a template. I love anything that will save me time doing things I don't like. And it's important to not lose ourselves in the shoulds when we're trying to bring creation through to the world. Staying close to that spark is the most important thing because that's the thing that the people need. That's really the thing that's of service.
Yeah. And that's really why I like to emphasize the creative aspect of creative business, because I think that there are a lot of different ways to do business, right? And a lot of the ways that business is taught is to sort of like see a hole in the market, come up with the most efficient, cheapest way to solve that problem, fill that hole, sell that to a bunch of people through ads and whatever else, right? And I think that that's not how I talk about business or how I do business in general or on this podcast. And I think that when I encounter deeply creative people who are dissatisfied in their business or any business, it often has to do with this sort of conundrum that we're untangling, which is where like they have looked up and out into the world perhaps for too long and they have lost that like looking within and that inner knowing. And so they or we, because this is not a call out, I include myself in this, like get caught up in the like, oh, well, this person did their launch this way. And oh, this person had a lot of success with Voxer coaching and this person did this. And so, especially in a moment where maybe finances feel tight or things feel scary, instead of doing the like weird, wild thing that maybe I know I want to do, or maybe I can't even hear yet, maybe I haven't I don't know what that thing is yet, it can feel so much easier to just go pick up all the things everyone else is doing.
Yeah. But that usually doesn't work for those kinds of people.
I don't think so. Or maybe it works in one context, like you make some money, but then you show up at my proverbial door feeling burnout, dissatisfied, frustrated, all of these walls that we hit as creative people when we're not
In alignment.
in alignment.
Yeah, because everyone's wiring is different. Their astro is different. Their design, whatever the words you want to use, their karma is different. Their ancestral baggage is different. Where they live is different. Their creative spark, it's like it's something. There are templates and there's helpful advice, and there is no shortcut to plugging into how it works for you. Like that's just something that has to be done, and it can't be skipped, unfortunately.
It can't. Even when you're so frustrated that thing that worked for somebody else doesn't work for you.
For sure. No, I have that. I'm like, oh my gosh, all they did was go on here and do that. And well, lo and behold. Yeah, I think we all do that. And there's ways that we can learn from other people and be like, then what would my way of trying to do that? We're all, even when we do look only out and try all the things, like there's so much learning from that. And it doesn't go to waste. But it's not the shortcut that we think it is, I think, a lot of the time.
Absolutely. I feel like one theme we've really underlined here, which I have just been talking about all year, is that starting or running a business, I feel like really makes you confront your desire for control. And by you, I mean me.
Yeah, I was like, wait, who's we in this situation?
It is me. And also the people of the podcast, because that to me is like the desire for the template to work perfectly, the outcome to be exactly what we thought it would be, all of this, like it's a lot of control and a desire for control. And I think that we've talked here about surrender, we've talked about the now, we've talked about alignment as these, I think of them often as antidotes to control, or perhaps like you can't access those things without releasing control. I also want to ask you about initiation, because my experience of starting a business, and I believe yours as well from some of our offline conversations, or even from what you've already shared here, like my experience of business has been that every insecurity I've had, every shadow around money or hard work or worth or value has been thrown in my face in the process of starting a business. It has definitely felt like an initiation period for me. But I know that you have, like a spiritual framework and understanding of initiation and perhaps the way that business wraps into that. And I'm curious if you could speak a bit to how you see small business or self-employment or even creative practice as a form or mode of initiation.
So I started the year with like a 2-part episode on my podcast, kind of diving into initiation. So I think I'll just leave a note for that here so that I don't feel like I have to recap that in any way, because I don't need to. I think shorthand is initiation is a death rebirth process. It's caterpillar into butterfly process. It's when we surrender and let go to such an extent that when we get back up again, we are different. In spiritual world, in magic world, it's the dying before you die, right? And it's something that it's something you can get really good at. It's the phoenix. It's true transformation. And I think, especially in the context of business, I think it's important to remember that it's not cognitive. It's not like, I just thought about it, now I'm going to try it differently. It's a deeply somatic or biological and like spiritual process. It's like about your soul perspective, and it changes your experience in your body. It's not like I had a mindset shift. Like that's not an initiation. It's not to say it's not valuable. It's just not what it is. And I think sometimes, especially if we've had success in the past and control tends to be our vibe, we can tend to think of healing and transformation to be like, oh, I just want to go back to the way it was before. But healing is not going back to the way it was before. There is no before, there's only now. And I think about people who've undergone this. I talk about it with my husband a lot because my husband has I don't think he would mind me sharing this, but went through a really radical stage of like really intense addiction with substances that almost nobody gets off of. Like most of like they do them till they die, like physically die. Had a really radical awakening process and it was almost instant. And like that person is dead. Like whoever that man was and who was living, like is absolutely dead, like does not exist anymore. That is an initiation. And it is a surrender to the unknown because you're like, I don't know what's next, but this stops. I don't know if the caterpillar is cognitively like, butterfly is next. Like, I don't know if they know that. Maybe they do. But I don't know if they do.
Yeah. They have to become goo without knowing what's next.
Yes. And I think that's a really core life process. It's also a mysterious process to really remember and anchor into business. Because as you mentioned, things about like money and things, these things that are really already high trigger topics for a lot of people and like poisonous topics for a lot of people, difficult things. I know for me, for sure. I mean, to me, the whole point of working for myself and making money and working my butt off was to never end up in bankruptcy court. And lo and behold, business landed me in bankruptcy court, And was that super fun? No. Did I love letting all of those people and myself down? No, it was absolutely humiliating. And I'm not afraid of it anymore. I am absolutely free of that. That's initiation. What makes something initiatory is how you engage it. It's not always coming from us where we decide we're going to do something different or we're going to be different or we spark it from the outside with some kind of ceremony or spiritual initiation process, which is totally possible when it comes from the outside. For instance, when we hit puberty, that's sort of an invitation for initiation from the outside. Whether or not we take it, who knows? And so we're not always in control of when the initiation finds us, but we are at sovereignty when we and it cultivates our sovereignty, I think, when we dance with it well and work with it the way that it's asking us to.
Yeah. And I think that this is why grief is such a portal for people because it becomes an initiation if you say let it. Sometimes it happens to you, right? Like grieving can really break open something and you come out transformed on the other side. And, I know many people this year who have lost someone and it has radically shifted how they show up in their life and in their business. And it's really brought through a lot of change. But loss is not the only external circumstance, as you've named, right? Puberty is one. And I also appreciate that you emphasize that like initiation can be how we take something up. Because, for instance, marriage can be an initiation.
Starting a business, closing a business.
Or it cannot, right? You can do all those things.
Yeah, or it cannot. Like bankruptcy could have just been something really painful and shitty that happened to me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for me. But it is for a lot of people a lot of the time. And I think that's you're hitting on a really important distinction is that just because something was painful doesn't mean it's an initiation. It's only if you went through the death rebirth process and you've surrendered and said yes to the I don't know and we're going under and I'll see you on the other side, whoever I am, however it is, now we're talking initiation. It's the gates of surrender and the nakedness of self. All of the trappings, all the things we used to like hide and like be safe to make sure that this never happens, like all of those things come off. One reason the story about Inanna's descent to the underworld is used so much is because it is so archetypal and it's in a lot of different kinds of myths, but because it's so well illustrated and articulated there, like, nope, this must come off. And the next gate, this must come off. Or like, isn't that it? It's like, nope, this must come off as well. It's a derobing. It's an undoing that has to happen. And then the process of finding our way back from the underworld is just as much a part of it. I can't help the caterpillar transform. I can keep watch, right? But I can't do it for them. And I think can be a really important quality to keep in mind if we're watching ourselves go through a deeply initiatory process where we feel like we're fumbling around in the dark, or we're watching someone else. What are the ways that we can be supportive and witness them in that, and also let them do it?
I wanted to have this conversation with you this year because it has been a hard year for so many people, because we have watched businesses close or go dormant or radically change. And I'm so grateful for your wisdom around this. And I wanted to offer this conversation to listeners who maybe are on that precipice of deciding, is 2025 an initiation for me, for my business, for any aspect of my life? And as you said, we don't always get to choose.
Sometimes life chooses for us.
Yes. Or the sacred entities choose for us, or the people choose for us. But I think that I have witnessed many businesses choose to see this year as an initiation, choose to fully dissolve into the goo. And I have seen others fight that with their entire being, right? Like it's coming for them and they are like, no, I will not dissolve. And frankly, that's really not for me to judge. That's not my place to have an opinion on. But it's one lens that I look at sort of business conversations with sometimes, especially with trusted friends and peers. And as we wrap up, I'm just curious. I want to ask if you have any wisdom or solace or cheering or anything to offer people who may be finding themselves in that moment this year.
It doesn't always mean that the whole ship is going down. Anything can become different when you become different. Sometimes that means the business has to close, and sometimes it just means you do. Sometimes it doesn't mean that you have to blow up your marriage and get a new partner and leave. That's not always it. It's not always about the outside getting rearranged. It's that you are different within whatever it is. And only you can really know if that's alignment or not. So I wanted to offer that. And something that was coming to mind to share was the business that I closed back in 2019 was a yoga and Pilates studio. And I was really thrashing on this. I could feel myself being like, something's got to change. And I wasn't like, is it me? Is it something? I couldn't see which was the change. And I was laying on the floor in Shavasana in someone else's class. And it literally felt like the clouds parted. And this voice was just like, this is not going to work. This is not your destiny. Get out. And I literally saw myself in this like green bubble and like walking down this hallway, seeing how it was going to be so hard. And it was very hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But that I was going to be protected, like that little caterpillar in the process. Like I had this green bubble around me. And it's like just because it's hard doesn't mean you're getting abandoned or that you did something wrong. It's not really about punishment at all. But I think somehow meeting ourselves in that sense of abandonment is part of the process of the underworld for sure. And I think the only thing that's coming to mind right now is this poem that gets read a lot, but it's honestly just so true for life that I can't not read it. It's kind of perfect for this. And it's by faithful creative servant, mystic, psychic, initiator, Rainer Maria Rilke. And this is translated by Joanna Macy, who also just recently passed away. Perhaps as you're listening to this, because wherever you are, whatever you're doing, however well your life is or isn't going right now, some part of you, some part of your life is in a chrysalis, because life is always changing and life is always transforming. And see if you can locate that part of yourself that's in chrysalis right now, where there's probably some grief and some fear, or maybe even some desire or excitement, all mingled together. And see if you can listen to this from inside that cocoon. God speaks to each of us as she makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall. Go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. And don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life, and you will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand.
And like maybe the episode just fades out.
That's how I would do it. And I'd be like, that's it. That's all that needed to. I love to end on I would be like, all right, surprise, it's over.
That was such beautiful medicine, and also like quintessentially you to me, to have the perfect poem for the moment and to both embrace the hour-long conversation and the poem that you can listen to instead of that hour-long conversation.
Yeah, yet another one of the things that I thought was a gift that wasn't valuable is having the perfect poem for the moment, which when you're in the right place at the right time as you, the gifts all make sense. You make sense somewhere.
They do. It does. It all does. Well, Grace, thank you for all of this. I want to invite listeners to subscribe to your newsletter, which is linked in the show notes, and to listen to your podcast, Homebody, which I am always honored to be behind the scenes on with you. It's such a beautiful show, and anyone tuned into this should definitely go listen to, at the very least, every single episode released this year. All of them, please.
I don't make weekly episodes. It's not a huge ask.
Yeah. No, just a few hours. It will be well spent. Thank you again. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Until next time, we will see you, I don't know, off the grid and in the now, perhaps. We'll see you there. Thanks for listening to Off the Grid. Don't forget to grab your free Leaving Social Media toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. This podcast is a Softer Sounds production. Our music is by Melissa Caitlin Carter of Making Audio Magic, and our logo is by Natelier Studio. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and until next time, I'll see you off the grid and on the interweb.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really